Hi guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zickery of Space Command. And just a quick check-in. If you haven't watched it yet, we've just posted the new version of the first hour of the Space Command pilot just right next to this video. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. I think you'll really, really like it. We're getting terrific response. And it also includes trailers for 5 hours of Space Command episodes, so coming up soon. So lots of cool stuff. Our Kickstarter campaign only has 3 more days to go, so we're at 75,000. It would be great if we could top 100,000. It would really help us build sets, build creatures, find a space, acquire it, just kind of really move forward to where we can shoot in the next few months, shoot the rest of Space Command Forgiveness, and then continue on to Great Solar War, etc. And also, of course, subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi just below, ding the bell, which gives you notifications, all that stuff. One thing I wanted to talk about was how to access the Space Command story. I've mentioned that the first season tells a bigger arc story, and I thought you might enjoy hearing a little bit about that story without it having spoilers per se. And so I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So here's the basics. If you want the full experience of Space Command, obviously watch the first hour. We're working on finishing the second hour now. We've shot it, and we're just doing visual effects and post. We've shot 40 minutes of the second story, and are going to be shooting the rest of that in the next few months. That's what this campaign has been about. But here's the way the story is structured. So the story starts with a prequel called A Hopeful Vision, and that is both a graphic novel, so we'll be releasing that as comic books and then bundling it as a graphic novel, and we'll also be doing it as a radio play with our actors, and it takes place 30 years from now and then 60 years from now, and that's where our first episode, Redemption, our pilot, takes place, our first 2-hour story, and that starts 60 years from now, and it basically introduces us to many of our major characters. Captain Jack Kemmer, who's the captain of the Paladin, Dr. Vaughn O'Dara, played by Mira Furlan, who is an xenoarchaeologist following the trail of some ancient alien artifacts, and this is at a time when we've had no first contact with any alien species. She has her daughter Yelena. She's got various, background on her, which we discover in the prequel. And by the way, all the prequels, the radio plays, the graphic novel, and the novels are all canon. So the more that you dive into this stuff, the more you know the story. So Vaughn O'Dara is Mira Furlan, whom I worked with on Babylon 5. Now, meantime, Robert Picardo plays Yusuf Sikander, a foreman in a mining colony out in the asteroid belt, and he oversees a team of synthetics, and one of them is Dornevan, played by Doug Jones. The synthetics are invented by Greg Mazzy, who's sort of a Steve Jobs of the future, and that's played by Bill Mumy, whom I've known since I was 7, who appeared in Twilight Zone and Lost in Space, and then, of course, Babylon 5, again, on which I worked, and we've known each other forever. So he's terrific. So he's a scientist with a son, problematical family relationships, and a lot of Space Command is about the generations, our parents, our children, our grandchildren, etc. And so it follows 5 generations of these families as we meet them, and Dornevan, Doug Jones's character, becomes somewhat of a father figure too to his kind. And so the first 2 episodes, the first 2 hours, are about how these characters meet, how they interact, how they come together, what happens as a result of that. Second story, Forgiveness, and again, I'm going to try not have spoilers, but I can just say that in the prequel we meet Jack Kemmer and his father and his mother, and see how they met. We meet Vaughn O'Dara and see how she chose the career she chose. We meet Yusuf Sikander and his father, and see again what led him to where he is. And we meet Greg Mazzy when he's inventing Dornevan. So Dornevan is the first of the synthetics. So it's a big, big, big story. Now, Forgiveness, our second 2-hour story, starts 3 years after Redemption, our first 2-hour story. And in this tale, we discover some more of what happened to Jack Kemmer and Captain Laura Essex, who we met in the first 2-hour story. We find that Captain Kemmer has a grudge against Kassane, who is the emperor, basically the warlord of the asteroid belt, and who Jack captured, and then who escaped and has gone missing for several years. And Jack discovers him when he gets a call from a religious community on Mercury, and Kassane is offering to turn himself in exchange for something favor he needs. And it's about forgiveness, and it's about whether people can change, whether they can be redeemed. And Ferran Tahir from J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie and from Iron Man plays Kasain. We have James Hong from Blade Runner and Big Trouble in Little China in that as well. And also Sean Kenny, who played Captain Pike in the wheelchair in the menagerie. So, you know, boop. And for those of you who know that, that means something. And so that story, again, is a 2-hour story that then follows our characters further into their chronology. Then, basically, our third 2-hour story, which you've already started shooting, is Great Solar War, and that jumps 20 years. And this is all in the first season of the show. Jumps 20 years, and now we see Jack Kemmer further along, and he's now risen up the ranks. And let's just say that there's a war going on in the solar system that involves a number of our characters in interesting and surprising ways, and Jack needs Dorn Evans' help in a very specific purpose. And it's a big, you know, space war story, and it really is examining, whereas the first story examined redemption, the second story examined forgiveness, the third story, Great Solar War, examines mainly father-son relationships or father-child relationships, and how that ripples down the generations, and then that leads to our fourth story, Empire, which takes place some years after that, and we meet Matt Kemmer, who is Jack's great grandson, and then we start jumping back and forth between the generations and the timeline, cause and effect, and just like Westworld does, in a very interesting way, we're starting to examine time and the ramifications between the generations. And so then there's Empire, Armin Shimmerman and Ethan Phillips, and others are going to be in that, Christina Moses, and then we go to the fifth of our episodes, 2-hour episodes. That's essentially, it's called Harvester, and it deals with alien species that we've encountered along the way and what happens when we encounter them. And then the final episode, the 2-hour episode of the first season, is Mousetrap, in which it all comes together and points an arrow toward the second season. So that's our year of Space Command. Now, we also, Maya Bonhoff has written the first Space Command novel, which recapitulates in great detail the 2-hour pilot, but also has the material between the first 2-hour story and the second 2-hour story 3 years later, and what happens and what leads to that. So it's really cool stuff. So anyway, that's about it. We'll have the comic books and the novel and all that stuff available for sale very, very soon. And thanks for everything. We really appreciate it. Bye, guys.